Right guys, this video is going to be all about A-level Edexcel Maths Pure Paper 2. Okay, hopefully you've seen my Paper 1 video, came out a couple of weeks ago. If not, obviously you don't need to watch it now because Paper 1's finished. Okay, so this video is going to basically analyze every single past paper from 2018 to 2023. So 6 papers in total for Pure Paper 2. Now I've combined Paper 1 and Paper 2 at the end, so we can see if there's any cheeky stuff going on year by year, and that'll be towards the end of the video. But I'm going to break this down based on topic and then subtopic and get more detailed as we go. So before I start, special shout out and appreciation to these two guys. So I haven't seen the Paper 1 2024. So if it was not for these two beautiful gentlemen, I would not be able to do this video at the end where I'd actually predict which topics are probably going to come up. So mad love and respect to these two. With that out of the way, let's move on. So who am I? I've had a bunch of people DM me, comments saying do you go to uni? Are you a teacher? I'm not a teacher, okay? I'm a full-time data analyst in the UK. I graduated with a first-class degree in biochem, and that's my area of expertise. I did A-level biology, chemistry, and maths, and then obviously moved away from maths slightly at uni. But I use maths basically every day at work to be a data analyst, right? So I've also been a tutor, biology, chemistry tutor, and these are some of my modules at uni. I know how to study. All right, cool. With that out of the way, that is who I am. My name's Jack. Let's go. So for maths, if you watch Paper 1, you'll be well familiar with this analogy right here, become a castle. I'm not going to rinse it in this video and repeat it, but really be aware of this fact, okay, from Paper 1. It's really important. Now, going on this castle analogy, subtopics stack a lot. I mentioned that maths abilities stack within Paper 1, but subtopics stack like absolute crazy in maths, okay? Specifically A-level papers rather than AS papers. So for example, right here, you need to be a master of trig, be able to use trig identities, anything to do with trig, because it may not be a trig question. It may be a differentiation or integration or exponential question, but they've integrated elements of trig into it. All right, cool. That's done. Let's look at the topics. So I went through this in my Paper 1 video. Everything is color-coded, and these are the 10 topics that you can be asked, okay? Now, I've ordered them from greatest to smallest based on the marks, so the total number of raw marks across the 6 papers. So I'm going to get on to Paper 2 in a second. If you came here for Paper 2, obviously I'm just explaining this, okay? And then we're going to compare them next to each other. All right, and then this is the mark percentage out of a total marks of 600, because there's 100 marks per paper, 6 papers, easy maths. And this is the frequency right here. The frequency is essentially just how many papers did this topic appear in, and then the average marks per paper is just the total marks divided by the frequency. Pretty simple stuff. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's compare Paper 1 and 2 next to each other. I'll actually drag this a little bit closer so we can get a little zoom action going on. All right, so we can see here that obviously based on marks alone, which isn't always the best thing to look at, but average marks per paper is also really good to look at as well. And it seems that essentially they go from largest to smallest in both cases. Yes, okay. We can see for the most part, the high yield topics are the same across Paper 1 and Paper 2. All right, so we can see here that algebra is first in both. And then for Paper 1, it's trig, it switches up to integration. Integration switches up to differentiation, and differentiation switches up to trig. So the 4 highest yield topics are the same for both papers, but just in a slightly different order. And then from there, we have sequence and series and exponentials and logs, exactly the same spot for both papers. And then it goes coordinate geometry, which is majority circles. And then that sort of shifts down a little bit, and then vectors shifts up here, etc. You can screenshot this as you need it and compare them as you go. Send it to your mates. It's really appreciated. Before we carry on, do like the video. This actually took me an insane amount of time to do. Subscribe, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. It helps out the channel a lot. So here on the right-hand side, we have a bit of the grade boundaries action going on. All right, so we've looked at the topics. Let's look at the grade boundaries. So again, just like with Paper 1, I was unable to find the 2019 and 2020 A-star grade, UMS grade boundaries. Someone kindly put it in the comments in the last paper 1 video, but I didn't get a link, so I couldn't find it, and I spent a while looking for it. So hopefully, again, that same person might be able to cheekily chuck them in the comments. But yeah, I'm assuming it's around the same based on the A grades being mid 50s, that this would be around the low 70s. All right, as we can see in 2023, paper 1 and paper 2 shot right up. After COVID, I'm guessing there was a bit of a lag period. We had the advanced spec in 2022. So I'm assuming that the grades you want to be going for in 2024 are around the same as 2023. Okay, I'm not 100%. Things change. And I haven't seen paper 1 2024, so I don't know how insanely difficult it was. But regarding the poll that I did, pretty good feedback. Most of you found it pretty good. So average marks, median marks, around 75% for an A star and around 57, high 50% for an A. But again, that incorporates the COVID years, so you have to be aware of that. All right, grade boundaries done. Let's look at some graphs. So these graphs right here, again, if I move things over slightly so they're a bit closer to one another. There we go. We can see this is just a visual representation of these two tables right here based on raw marks. So if you guys are a bit more visual, hopefully a chart helps you, just pretty colors and all that. Everything's color coded. Hopefully that helps you out. What we're going to do now is move past the topics. So I think in maths, the topics are super important to start with, rather than chemistry and biology where you need to go a lot deeper. The overall topic you should try and revise based on past paper questions as a whole. Okay, and then from there, you can fine tune your technique with various elements of trig, various elements of integration, etc., which is what we're going to look at now. So I'm going to do a deep dive, all right, a real deep dive for paper 1 and paper 2, and then we're going to do an even deeper dive based on the frequency, whether it came up in year 1, year 2, etc. If all you care about is this, then feel free to skip ahead. But this, I think, is pretty interesting to see. It's essentially a repeat of this table, but diving into the subtopics rather than the broad overarching umbrella topics. Okay, so if you weren't aware, in my paper 1 video, I made this spreadsheet document, which essentially shows which content comes up under each coded subtopic that I've done. So I've recoded everything and grouped them up into certain areas. It's not perfect, but it's the best I can do. If you come up with a different way of grouping it, give me a shout. And then what I've done differently this time is I've highlighted which content is year 1 or year 12 and which content is year 2 or year 13. Okay, so I'll link this again in the description. You can go through if anything isn't clear. This is straight out of the Edexcel textbook. Okay, so you could go down to here, trig identities and equations. What is included in that? We've got a year 1 content, year 2 content, etc. All right, and then all of these coded subtopics are the ones that you're going to see in these tables. All right. Right, so as we can see here, there's quite a big shift for some things and then not others. So what do I mean by that? So for example, we can see here that product quotient and chain rule came up every single year in paper 1, but they're all the way down here in paper 2. They've only come up 3 times. All right, so that's really something to keep in mind. Now, again, going back to this maths abilities stack and subtopic stack. Okay, so what I've tried my best to do is, if it's the core theme of the question or the mark scheme showed a specific technique required for a mark, I've allocated a mark to that. So sometimes, for example, if it's an integration question, right, whatever it may be, one of these examples, and it has trig identity knowledge or trig ability, I haven't allocated any marks to trig if it's not explicitly mentioned in the mark scheme. Okay, but the trig knowledge and ability and identities, etc., are needed to be able to do the integration. I hope that makes sense. So this isn't a perfect representation of every minor mark that comes up, but I've grouped things as well as possible under the core subtopics. Okay, so keep that in mind. But as you can see here, integration by substitution parts, reverse chain rule, and partial fractions, both right near the top here, okay? Frequency 5 in paper 1, frequency 6 in paper 2. And then we have circles, interestingly, came up 5 times in paper 1, but it's only come up once in paper 2. So therefore, it's come up 6 times across the 6 years of papers, but it had favoritism towards paper 1. Okay. Now we'll look at the predictions in a minute in terms of whether something did or did not come up in paper 1 2024 and go from there. I'm not going to spend too much more time on this table. Okay, you can pause the video, go through it yourself, send it to your mates if you're interested, and sort of look what comes up more often in paper 1, what comes up more often in paper 2, etc. As I said, guys, I put a lot of time into this. Everything's color coded. I really hope it helps you out. All right, cool. Let's move on to the actual predictions. I'm trying to fly through this a bit quicker so you guys can see the important stuff. Normally in my previous videos, I would have just done this and then left it. But because paper 1 has happened, we're sort of at an advantage here of what we know may or may not come up. So let's get my cheeky pen out and let's start this, okay? So as I said, guys, special shout out to these two. Without them, I wouldn't know that these subtopics and topics came up. So that is really important to get out of the way, okay? These are a list of the absent or limited subtopics within paper 1 2024. Now, as I said, I haven't gone through the paper. I haven't seen it myself. So if you're like, oh, something is missing here, this definitely wasn't in as well, just use this table and go from there and think, okay, that was also missing. Or if I've put something here that was actually present, then just get rid of it and just ignore it, okay? This isn't a perfect representation, but it's as good as I can do based on the limited perspective I've had, okay? So what I'm going to start with is I'm going to go through these one by one, as well as some major topics from this table, and see if there's a pattern across the years, okay? So let's look at quadratics to begin with. So quadratics isn't actually present in the subtopics because I've grouped them. It actually comes under year 1 algebra, okay? So as we can see here, it completely skipped 2018 for both papers. And then it was present for both papers in 2019, one paper in 2020, one paper in 2021, one, okay? So even though it missed both papers in 2018, based on the other papers we have historically, I'm going to assume that if a portion of that being quadratics didn't come up, then it's going to be present in 2024 in some capacity. So I'm just going to move on to transformations. Now, apparently transformations didn't come up. So let's see what happened here. Completely absent in 2018, 6 marker in paper 1 2019, then missed it. Completely absent from 2020. 2021, it had 2 marks in paper 2, not much at all. 4 marks in paper 1 2022, and then completely absent from 2023. So this may be absent from 2024. So this is not a definite gonna come up. So that is my perspective. Obviously still revise it if you can, because it could come up. But you can see here that transformations in general only receive 12 marks across the 6 years. And that is 12 papers in total. Okay, 3 of the 12 papers it came up in. So just keep that in mind. I really hope you find this table helpful. Moving on, we have got inequalities. All right, so inequalities. We've got absent here. It came up once in 2019, twice in 2020, once in 2021, once in 2022, and once in 2023. So I'm going to say inequalities is probably going to come up, excluding the fact that it was missing from 2018. But again, it's a very basic year 1 topic. And we can see here that the marks available across the 6 years, across 12 papers, was only 17 marks. So that's something to really consider. All right, next up, we have good old circles. Okay, so let's see what's going on with circles. 2018, it came up. 2019, it was completely absent right here. 2020, it was up in both papers, up in one paper, one paper, one paper. And then that is the end, 2023. So we only missed both papers in 2019. Apart from that, it came up at least once. So my perspective here is circles is a way to go. That is what you want to be looking at for paper 2 2024, considering it was absent. Again, it may not come up considering 2019, but I'm a betting man and I would say it's probably going to come up. All right, we can see here that parametrics. Let's look at parametrics. So again, 10 marks in 2018 paper 1. It came up in 2019, absent from 2020, came up in 21, 22, and 23. Okay, So what we can see from parametrics is that it's come up in 5 of the 12 papers. And when it does come up, it's 5.8 marks on average, which isn't bad. So I would say, again, parametrics is probably going to come up in some capacity. Now, obviously with parametrics, you have parametric integration and differentiation that can come up. So that's also a factor, right? But this parametric is specifically to do with the third topic of coordinate geometry right here. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Right, let's move on to sequence and series. So to my understanding, we had geometric that came up and we had binomial expansion. Those are the two cheeky boys that came up. But here we've got the other 3 topics which can come up. So let's look at this: arithmetic, recurrence relations, and sigma notation. So here we can see this was completely absent from 2018 and 2019. Any other complete gaps? No, it was in at least one of the papers in the other 4 years. We have recurrence relations came up at least once every single year. So I'm going to actually say that if recurrence relations didn't come up, it's probably going to come up in paper 2 2024, just based on the patterns that we've seen so far. But again, as we can see, sometimes things happen completely differently where it's absent from both papers. So do keep that in mind, but I'm doing the best I can to predict these. Next up, we've got sigma. All right, sigma. So it came up once, nothing. Once. Okay, so again, it can be absent in a specific year, but that's something to keep an eye on. When it does come up, not the highest marks, guys, 2.4 marks on average. So if you do want to focus your revision on things that come up more often and have higher marks, they've already occurred out of these 2. Okay, but they might throw in some crazy questions on arithmetic. I don't know. What they seem to be doing more lately is doing more synoptic questions. So pulling from a variety of subtopics and sandwiching them all together. Okay, so you might have a cheeky bit of series chucked with something else. So just keep that in mind. All right, so that's series, sequence and series done. Trig, good old trig. I would say, without a doubt, even if it had come up a ton in paper 1, you should revise trig. Okay, so we can look here. What have we got? Small angle approximations came up once, not at all, once, not at all, once, okay? And when it does come up, it only has 3.5 marks on average. So not the highest yield topic available, in my opinion. But there you go. It might come up because it was absent from paper 1. Trig identities and equations. Right, so this one is such a broad topic. As we can see, it was absent from paper 1 2018. But look at this, guys, 18 marks in paper 2. They went absolutely crazy. And then again, 18 marks right here, 22 marks collectively. This was a bit on the lower side. They put more emphasis on trig modeling in that year. But there we go, another 8 marks in 2022 and then 10 marks in 2023. So I'm not sure how much of this came up within paper 1 because it's quite a broad topic. If you look over here, it includes all of this, year 1, year 2. So I'd say go through this and think, oh, how much of this came up? Did it come up in paper 1 or not? And what I want to show to you, clearly, just because it was in paper 1 doesn't mean it doesn't come up in paper 2, which is what I feel like a lot of people are assuming. As we can see, there's double years for geometric. There's double years for trig. Double years for trig. Okay, and other areas. All right, so just keep that, double areas for circles. So there can be repeats across the 2 papers. It's not like it's gonna be absent if it came up in paper 1. All right, so really, really important to keep that in mind. I'd say have a go at trig identities and equations. You should have already mastered this, ideally. All right, trig modeling, apparently it isn't in my list. I'm assuming it came up, but nonetheless, always a good one to be aware of. The practice questions on physics and maths tutor. It's going to require all knowledge from the previous trig subtopics, and they're just going to apply it to a specific modeling question. All right, so just keep that in mind. Next up, we have exponential and log modeling. 100% practice this. Edexcel go crazy for modeling for exponentials and logs. More on the exponential side, but never rule out the log modeling. And then we have just everything to do with log equations and linear log graphs. So where can we see exponential and log modeling? Both papers, both papers, both papers, both papers, one paper, both papers. So in my opinion, this is gonna come up in paper 2 2024 if it was absent from paper 1 2024, unless Edexcel is just completely switching up on us, which is possible. All right, I cannot predict what's going to happen. And then obviously here we have logs, natural logs, exponential equations. This is essentially basically everything to do with the logs that you learn in year 1. If I can find it right here, all of this juicy stuff right here, you should be well aware of all of this. So let's zoom in again on our shizzle and see what's happening. So we can see it's completely absent from 2018, both papers, one paper, both papers. So I'm also confident that this is going to come up at least in some capacity, excluding 2018. We have a pretty good track record there. But where it does come up, the log modeling is so much higher marks on average. That's where I'd want to focus my time. But again, you kind of need to know this to feed it into the modeling anyway. So just keep that in mind. All right, differentiation. Things are getting juicy. Let's look at this. So what came up, I think specifically the product and the chain rule, as far as I understood it, didn't come up in paper 1 2024. And then for the rates of change, this didn't come up either, but this one is super rare. So if we have rates of change over here, it only came up once, guys, in 2018. But when it does come up, high marks, okay? So as we can see, it was in 2018 and it hasn't been in a single paper since then. All right, so really important to keep that in mind. There's a high chance that rates of change will come up considering it's skipped 5 years. So yeah, one to keep in mind there. What else have we got? So I said specific focus on the product and chain rule. So this is a no-brainer. You 100% want to be going for this. As you can see, I've kind of grouped it up to also include the quotient rule, but it comes up in at least one paper every single year. So you 100% want to be revising that. Okay, it's really important to learn that topic. And then we have parametric and implicit differentiation. So that's really important. I don't know if implicit came up. I've grouped these in my subtopics, so maybe implicit came up, but I'm pretty sure parametrics didn't. If I'm incorrect, guys, just use your own brain, use your own logic and say parametrics did come up. So I'm going to ignore that one. But as we can see here, like it can come up in both papers. 15 marks. What year was this? 2021 paper 2. All right, so it's really important to pay attention to parametric and implicit differentiation. Some chunky marks up for grabs here among the paper 2s. But best of luck with that. Differentiation done. Let's move on to integration. All right, so this area under a curve and limit of sum is actually quite a broad topic. The name isn't the best giveaway. So as we can see here, area under a curve and limit of sum, it includes all of this stuff, okay? An area under a curve with definite integrals, this can involve some of this. Remember that, guys. So if it's not explicitly this standalone, I've tried to slot it under the area under a curve subtopic, specifically if they've asked you to solve the area under a curve, right? It's basically self-explanatory. But you need to be aware of this knowledge sometimes to feed into there. All right, so it's really, really important to be aware of. Let's scroll back down. Okay, so what we've got here, area under a curve, limit of sum. Let's check how this came up. So a ton of marks in 2019, completely absent from 2018. We have a few marks in 2020, a few marks in 2021, both papers in 2022, and then one paper in 2023. So from this pattern, I'm going to say that this is probably going to come up in some way. It was in 8 marks in 2023, so I don't know if it will come up that much, but you never know, guys. You never know what is going to happen, not going to lie. Next up, integration by substitution, parts, reverse chain rule, and partial fractions. So to my understanding, elements of this did come up, okay? I'm not sure which ones did come up, but just pay attention. You should be comfortable with all of these elements of integration. If you're doing A-level maths, it's really important. So as we can see here, comes up both papers, both papers, both papers, both papers, both papers. Actually skipped paper 1 in 2023, but then it came up again in 2023 paper 2. So really important to pay attention to this topic. I don't know. I think it was integration by substitution that came up so far, but I'm not 100% on that. So make sure you revise that as a whole where you can, just going through those past paper questions by topic. Right, so let's rub this out and move on to solving and modeling differential equations. So this one is interesting. Came up once in 2018, once in 2022. I don't know where 2022 came from. 2019, once in 2020, once in 2021, once in 2022, and once in 2023. So I am very, very confident that if modeling and solving differential equations didn't come up in paper 1, it's gonna come up in paper 2. That is my perspective. All right, cool. Year 1 fundamental and year 2 fundamental integration. Again, if you don't know what's included in this, check out the link in the description. It's going to be all of this. It's going to be all of this stuff. Okay, year 1, year 2 fundamentals. Let's move back. I'll keep shifting around. As you can see here, it's pretty absent, all right? Year 2 fundamentals missing. Year 1's missing. Little cheeky bit in paper 2. Missing. So I'm not too concerned with these subtopics, but obviously because maths abilities stack, you kind of need to just know these as a prerequisite to move on to the more advanced year 13 integration. Okay, so these should be done already. You shouldn't even have to worry about them. It's just basic algebraic integration and stuff like that, okay? So let's move on to numerical methods. So we've got iterative method, roots through changing sign, and the trapezium rule. So we can forget Newton-Raphson. Now, Newton-Raphson came up in paper 1, 2024, to my understanding, which is interesting because as we can see here, it comes up in paper 2 when it does come up, right here. So there's a track record there. So what that tells me is that they are not consistent with their sort of patterns, right? I'm doing my best to look for patterns, but it's not always consistent. So please keep that in mind. All right, so let's get rid of Newton-Raphson. Iterative method came up once, came up once. So if iterative method didn't come up, I am confident that it's going to come up. Again, cannot predict the future, but when it does come up, it's only got 3.2 marks on average, which isn't that great. Let's move on to roots through change in sign. So it came up once here, and once here, but again, super low marks on average. So I wouldn't worry too much about this, but again, they might throw a chunky, crazy amount of marks for no reason. But there we go. Trapezium rule. Okay. Missed 2018, came up in 2019, 2020, 21. What's that, 22? So it was 22 as well, and 23. Okay. So this has come up 5 papers out of the 6 years. So I'm pretty confident that if this was absent from paper 1 2024, it is going to come up, but that is just my opinion. All right, let's look at vectors. Now vectors has come up 9 papers out of the 12. All right, so paper 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, both. All right, so considering it was absent from paper 1 2024, you want to be revising vectors. Now a caveat to vectors is it's not a crazy amount of marks. And if you struggle with vectors, then, you know, don't spend too much time on it because when it does come up, it's low marks. Historically, this may change. All right. So that's it, guys. That is the predictions for paper 2 2024. Again, I cannot emphasize this enough. Just because something has already come up, so these are the list of things that haven't come up. Just because something has already come up doesn't mean it can't rear its cheeky head again in paper 2. As we can see here, that happens now and again. All right. Various things come up more than 1 year. So like this, geometric came up twice. Okay. And different variations for subtopics throughout the years. Take a look at this table, screenshot it, do whatever the hell you want with it. I really hope you find it helpful. And again, use these, work your way through the top, starting from the topics to the subtopics. And then obviously, because we've done paper 1, we know what came up, what didn't come up, and we can sort of assume things from there. Okay. But like I said, guys, become a castle and you will get an A or an A star. All right. Best of luck, guys. Peace.